I never thought buying a duplex in a quiet tree-lined suburb would lead me to become a sworn enemy of the Homeowners Association, or more specifically Karen Whitmore, the self-declared queen of Maple Ridge. But then again, I didn't exactly read the fine print when I bought the property, nor did I anticipate that the sheriff himself would become my tenant. Life, as it turns out, has a dark sense of humor. Let me back up. My name's Tyson Reed. I'm 34, a former IT engineer turned real estate investor. I bought a few properties during the housing dip and lucked out when I snagged the duplex on 227 Maple Ridge Drive. It was a steal. Big yard, private entrance for each unit, and zoned for rental. What I didn't know was that the duplex was technically located inside the HOA zone of Maple Ridge, a community so strict they fined a guy for painting his mailbox cobalt blue instead of navy. And presiding over this fiefdom was none other than Karen Whitmore. Now, this wasn't just any Karen. She had the signature platinum bob, a clipboard that was basically an extension of her arm, and a passion for bylaws that bordered on the religious. I met her 3 hours after I moved in. She knocked on my door at 6:12 a.m. I opened it groggy, coffeeless, and wearing a SpongeBob t-shirt. She scowled. "Mr. Reed, I represent the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. I noticed your recycling bins are not aligned at the curb and your lawn exceeds the 2.5-inch regulation height." I blinked. "Morning to you too." She didn't smile. She handed me a citation slip, my first of many. The sheriff arrives. Now here's where the plot thickens. A few weeks after I moved in, I leased the other side of the duplex to a sheriff's deputy named Marcus Caldwell. Big guy, quiet, always paid rent on time. He lived alone, and when I asked what he thought about the HOA, he gave a low chuckle. "Rent. I don't deal with their nonsense." He had no idea what was coming. War begins. Karen's vendetta against me grew faster than weeds in spring. She fined me for leaving my garage door open too long, for having a barbecue grill visible from the street, and once, no joke, for a garden gnome she claimed looked aggressive. The worst was when she trespassed to take pictures of my backyard for a shade cloth violation. That's when I decided to take action. I pored over the HOA charter and found a golden nugget. The duplex was grandfathered in as a rental property before the HOA boundaries had shifted 10 years ago, which meant legally I didn't have to follow any of their rules. Armed with this, I sent her a cease and desist letter. She responded by calling a surprise HOA meeting to revoke my privileges. I responded by installing an 8-foot fence and placing a sign that read, "Private property, non-HOA member, no trespassing." And then I cut the line. The power play. Karen had been stealing power. See, our duplex had a shared utility box from when it was originally built. The previous owner had installed a split meter system, but the outdoor garden lights that lined the shared walkway, installed illegally by the HOA, were drawing from my meter. I'd been paying for Karen's precious HOA pathway lights this entire time, so I shut them off. Technically, I hired an electrician who disconnected the line safely and legally, but that was enough. That night, the lights went out along the central path that led to the HOA's monthly Tuesday tea. Karen flipped. She came banging on my door, this time at 8:45 p.m. A respectable hour, I'll admit, but her voice was anything but respectable. "You've endangered this community. How dare you shut down the safety lights?" I leaned in the doorway. "You mean the lights illegally hooked to my meter? I'd call that theft." Her face turned tomato red. "This is an emergency. I'm calling the authorities." The 911 call. She did it. She actually called 911. I was sipping a beer on my porch when the deputy squad car pulled up. The sheriff stepped out and I waved casually. Marcus Caldwell, my tenant, raised an eyebrow at Karen, who immediately began ranting. "She's hysterical," he told me in a low voice. "What exactly happened?" I handed him the electrical report and the cease and desist order. He nodded, reading them carefully while Karen continued to rant in the background about community integrity and legal action. Finally, Marcus turned to her and said, "Ma'am, you're trespassing and misusing emergency services, and just so you're aware, I rent from Mr. Reed. He's my landlord. This is a civil matter at best, and you don't have a leg to stand on." Karen stared at him like someone had just unplugged her brain. You rent from him?" "Yes, ma'am." The silence that followed was pure art. She turned and stormed off, yelling something about a lawsuit. The aftermath. You'd think that would be the end of it. Oh no. Karen doubled down. She called the city inspector, tried to report zoning violations, even sent an anonymous tip to the fire marshal claiming I had illegal propane storage. Every report was investigated and dismissed. Marcus, bless him, started wearing his full uniform when gardening out front. Sometimes he'd wave to Karen as she passed, but the final blow came when I ran for the open city council seat in our district. I won. Landslide. Turns out everyone hated the HOA. My first order of business? Enact local legislation clarifying property rights for grandfathered residences and limiting HOA overreach in mixed zoning areas. Karen resigned from the HOA 2 months later, citing health concerns. Rumor has it, she tried to sell her house. But it's still on the market. Nobody wants to buy in Maple Ridge after the local paper ran a story titled, "Sheriff's Landlord Exposes HOA Tyranny." Epilogue: Peace and Power. Now I spend most evenings on my porch, enjoying the quiet, the breeze, and my lower electric bill. Karen's house? Still dark. And the sheriff? He's now my friend, my tenant, and unofficially, Maple Ridge's new peacekeeper. Funny how life works out when you stand up to the right bully. A few weeks passed after the power outage incident, as I'd come to call it in my mind. Marcus and I had a good laugh about it over ribs on my porch one evening. He even offered to let me keep his patrol car parked in our shared driveway, just to keep Karen twitchy. I declined, mostly because I didn't want to escalate things. Karen, however, had no such hesitation. It started with mail. My Amazon deliveries mysteriously went missing. Then my trash bin was accidentally taken from my driveway. And then I got a knock on my door from a man wearing a beige suit and a smirk. "Mr. Reed, I'm serving you on behalf of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association." I took the envelope. Lawsuit? Correct. Inside was a packet that accused me of everything from willful endangerment of HOA property to emotional distress. It was pure fiction. Still, Karen had somehow convinced the HOA board to bankroll a suit against me. I should have been angry, but instead I smiled. She'd just made a big mistake. I have a cousin, Cynthia, who works for a prominent real estate law firm in the city. She's as brilliant as she is ruthless, and she owed me a favor from a very messy Vegas weekend we don't speak of. 2 days later, she met me at my house and reviewed the case. Her verdict? "Tyson, this is weaker than decaf coffee. I'm going to bury them." We filed a motion to dismiss and countersued for harassment, misuse of HOA funds, and illegal surveillance. Turns out, those cameras Karen installed without approval. Yeah, illegal when pointed at private property. When Karen got served back, her hands visibly shook. She made a scene in the cul-de-sac, shouting about legal retaliation and city corruption. Neighbors peeked out from behind blinds, phones recording. Marcus, still in uniform, casually strolled by and said, "You might want to read the civil code before embarrassing yourself in public again, Ms. Whitmore." She stormed inside and slammed the door. I thought that was the climax. I was wrong. The countersuit made the rounds fast. A few board members got cold feet. One by one, they started visiting me, off the record, apologizing, explaining they didn't know Karen was going to take it this far. Turns out, Karen had been running the HOA like a mini dictatorship for years. People had simply complied out of fear or apathy. But now that someone had stood up and was winning, they began to wake up. One neighbor, Phil, who'd once been fined for his basketball hoop, knocked on my door with coffee and cookies. "Heard what you're doing," he said. "About time." Someone took her down a peg. Within days, an emergency board meeting was called. This time, it wasn't Karen at the podium. It was Claire Jensen, a former HOA secretary who had resigned 3 years earlier after Karen publicly humiliated her for mismatching patio cushions. Claire came back with a vengeance. She motioned to freeze HOA spending. She questioned how Karen had approved the lawsuit without a full vote. She even brought a forensic accountant to comb through HOA finances. It was brutal. Karen was cornered, forced to resign not just as president, but from the board entirely. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip for days. Karen's house went up for sale the following week. The listing was bland and the price suspiciously low. People speculated she was trying to flee before our countersuit hit court. She never showed up to court, by the way. The case was dismissed, and Cynthia filed a lien for court costs. Karen had to settle quietly or risk her house being tied up in litigation for years. Meanwhile, the HOA held a full election. Phil became the new president, and one of the first motions passed was to formally recognize that grandfathered properties, like mine, were not subject to HOA rules. A copy of the motion was mailed to me with a handwritten note. "Thanks for reminding us that common sense still exists, Phil." Peace finally returned to Maple Ridge. With the chaos behind me, I decided to upgrade the property. Marcus and I split costs to add a shared backyard deck with a fire pit. We invited neighbors for a barbecue the day it was finished. More people showed up than I expected. Even Claire came by with her famous lemon bars. Everyone swapped Karen stories like, War veterans. Stories about fines, threats, ridiculous citations for things like excessive garden ornamentation. It was cathartic. Marcus leaned over to me as people laughed and shared drinks. Never thought I'd see this place relaxed. I chuckled. Turns out all it took was a little blackout. Karen never returned to Maple Ridge. The house eventually sold to a young couple with 2 dogs and a love for gardening. I made a point to introduce myself, shared a drink with them, and offered some friendly advice. If anyone tries to tell you your garden gnome is too whimsical, tell them to read the revised bylaws. They laughed. We became fast friends. The HOA, now operating with transparency and fairness, even hosted a community garden day. Marcus, still living next door, volunteered to handle safety and parking. And me? I bought a second duplex 2 streets over. This time I made damn sure it wasn't anywhere near an HOA. Still, I sometimes sit on the porch, drink in hand, and stare at the spot where Karen's precious lights used to shine. It's dark now, quiet, and absolutely perfect.